Okay, welcome to IT-1001, week number 3 already. We're already in week number 3. Time does fly when you're having fun. And this week I'm going to give you a somewhat of a break from my IT lab. And we're going to be talking about information literacy. So there's a lot of different things that I want to review with you this evening in regards to information literacy. It is an important topic to cover anytime you're covering IT. All right, information literacy is something that is a very good skill to have right now in present day America, right? Or just in the world in general, because there is just so much garbage mixed in with real good information on the internet and through other types of media that sometimes it's very difficult to tell what is truth from fiction. And you've been hearing a lot of this in the news now, right? With Russia meddling with the election, with data on Facebook that may not be as accurate as people believe. Some people believe everything they read. So understanding how to disseminate information, how to understand information, and how to be literate in information is very, very important. So information literacy is basically how to be literate when evaluating information. So how to be literate, okay, in regards to information. We're all literate. We all can read, right? But can we understand, and do we have literacy in information? And you talk about information, there's lots of information out there, right? Flowing through the media. Like I said, you turn on the TV, there are like thousands of cable channels. There are thousands, not even thousands, but millions, probably tens of millions of websites. There are different types of media that's out there that proposes to present information to people. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind if you're talking about a website, anybody can create a website. You don't have to have a special license. You just have to have a little bit of money. And sometimes you can create a website for free. So you need access to the internet, and you need to have some foundational, I guess, computer knowledge to know how to create a very basic website. And you can get any message you want to the entire world. And it could be a very dangerous tool. And we see it with some religious fundamentalists who like to get information out there. We see it through terrorism. We see it through other types of hate speeches that we may see on the internet, or hate information, or it's really it can be used for improper means. So again, students and people in general believe sometimes everything they read. So it's, again, very important to understand how to disseminate information. All right, how to differentiate good information from bad information. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. And when we do that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen so we can go into some of the websites, and we can even evaluate websites as well. I haven't looked at some of the websites that are out there, but I'm sure if I Google bad websites, we will see a whole bunch of websites that are poorly designed, and other websites that are just, they won't really engage people, right? And there are different ways to evaluate a website's accuracy and information, whether or not the information is reputable, just by viewing the aesthetics or the visual layouts of the website. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of those concepts as well. I'll give you an overview of all these things. I won't be talking for hours, okay? So this will definitely be under an hour, probably about maybe a half an hour to 45 minutes, okay? So what I want to do is share my screen. All right, so you should see my screen pop up. Right, so, and I have Word here, and this is where I'm going to put some notes for you. So this course is IT-1001, and this is information literacy. And something I wanted to talk about too is the American Library Association, right, or the ALA, American Library Association, there is an association that develops library standards, and it's called the American Library Association. Now, this association of people who are into information and organizing information, it could be now digital, most of it's digital information, but old-fashioned textbooks, hard copy information. It's basically a consortium of librarians and other people who study information gathering and knowledge sharing. And these people in this organization develop standards, okay? So this organization developed the 5 components of information literacy in the 21st century. So I want you to be familiar with these 5 components. The first component is define, and we'll talk about each one of these. The second component is find, then evaluate. Fourth is organize. And the 5th is communicate. We have define, find, evaluate, organize, and communicate. Now, what do these 5 components mean? So these are the 5 components that the American Library Association states that every person should follow in order when conducting research. And if you basically follow each one of these components, you would be doing thorough research, using a variety of sources and communicating in various ways to make your presentation, whether it be a research project, whether it be a verbal presentation or some other type of deliverable, to actually find the information, evaluate the information, and communicate the information in standardized ways. And when you talk about standardization, you're also talking about putting something in a way that's recognized by society in a very formal way, all right? Because we can all do things all different ways, all right? We don't have standardization, then, without standardization, we have chaos, right? So when you have a group of experts in communicating information and organizing information tell you how to do research, you're probably doing research well. You're probably doing it the right way, okay? So this American Library Association has these 5 components of information literacy in the 21st century. The first one is, and again, this is steps you should take when doing research. The first one is defining your research question, right? So define. So compose a research question that is not too broad. It should be a narrow, excuse me, a narrow question, very directed, pointed question. So one mistake that we see a lot of students make when they're choosing a research question is the question becomes too broad. So for example, some students will do a paper on we'll ask the student what the topic is of your research paper, and it may be researching a historical figure, and they'll write a paper, or they'll present the topic that states, who is Abraham Lincoln? It's a very broad statement, right? It's a very broad question. So I may, as an instructor, say, all right, yeah, sure. Yeah, I want you to write an entire paper on who Abraham Lincoln was. And in my mind, the back of my mind, I'm like, if the student's actually going to answer that question, that paper is probably going to be thousands of pages long, because Abraham Lincoln was a lot of things, okay? He was a politician. He was he was the president of the United States, right? He was a proponent for equal rights. He was an outdoorsman, all right? He was a lot of different things, and I'd be writing forever and ever and ever. He was also an author, right? So you should really compose a research question that's pointed. So basically, you can say, what were the aspirations of Abraham Lincoln to become president? Okay, so you may be writing, and it's more, probably that would be a more interesting topic, like what inspired Abraham Lincoln to become president? What were his aspirations, right? Right? What inspired him to take those steps? Now, that would actually also take some research. That may be pointed research, and be doing more thorough research in that way, because there's a lot of research on who he was, but looking at Abraham Lincoln from a different perspective will require you to do different research, right? So once you define your research question, the next thing you're going to do is find your sources. All right. So find would be, and I'm going to compose research. So another thing is find, locate a variety of sources using a variety of media. Okay. Now, when we talk about sources, we're talking about two types of sources. We have primary and B, secondary. Okay, so if we talk about primary and secondary sources, what are some of the primary sources? Well, when you're doing research, you should be using a variety of sources, using a variety of media. So what does that mean? You should be using some primary sources, some secondary sources. So primary sources would be the source, so interviewing people. Now, it'd be if your topic is Abraham Lincoln, it's going to be very difficult to interview people who have firsthand recollection. It would be, impossible to interview people who have firsthand recollection of Abraham Lincoln. So obviously what you want to do is maybe obviously there are lots of biographies on Abraham Lincoln. So something you can do is take out a biography, locate a biography in the library, and there's probably a lot of online sources for biographies, and take some of your information from a biography. So if you're looking at what were his aspirations to become president, I'm sure there are some topics in his biography that would delve a little deeper into that. Okay. So biography would actually be a secondary source. All right. Primary source would be an interview, I'm not sure if Abraham Lincoln ever wrote any memoirs, but if he did, that would be a primary source. Autobiographies, I don't believe Abraham Lincoln wrote an autobiography, but that would also be a primary source. Obviously, interviews with people, transcripts of speeches. So obviously there's lots of speeches in the Library of Congress, and there are facsimiles of those speeches in other libraries. You may want to take out some of those speeches and analyze them, and it'll give you some insight, maybe by his spoken word, what aspired him to become president, right? What were his aspirations once again? Government documents are primary sources, observations. So some people sometimes go to different organizations, and they watch people who act like Abraham Lincoln. They do some type of Abraham Lincoln, and maybe someone who's in character as Abraham Lincoln. Maybe watching that can give you some feedback about who Abraham Lincoln really was and what inspired him to become president. Right. So those are some things. Those are some primary sources. You should always mix your primary sources with your secondary sources. Some secondary sources would be those are the ones that you're most familiar with, probably books and textbooks, scholarly journals, handbooks, dictionaries, encyclopedias, magazine articles. All right, periodicals. What are periodicals? Periodicals are those works, written works that are produced during a period, right? So a periodical would be something that's produced or published periodically. That could be a newspaper, right? Published sometimes daily, monthly. You may have magazines. Magazines are periodicals because they're published. They could be a weekly magazine. It could be a daily magazine. Most likely it's a monthly magazine. Okay, so those are periodicals. A journal is an academic journal is actually a very reputable source to use for research. Even better than a journal. So if you talk about, say, something that you hear a lot about is the New England Journal of Medicine, right? So if you're a doctor, you probably rely on some of those articles to read more about different case studies in health. All right, but if you talk about a peer-reviewed journal, all right, so then again, the New England Journal of Medicine is a very reputable source. It's written by experts, all right, in the field. But a peer-reviewed journal is actually written by experts in the field, but then reviewed by another expert who's a peer to ensure that the information is very accurate. All right, peer-reviewed journals are probably the best sources of information. Okay. So one thing I wanted to show you too is that if you do, say, any type of source that you use for your research, you have to cite it. Okay, citing your sources is very, very important, because if you don't cite, you could be, you could be accused of plagiarism, and if you're accused of plagiarism, that's actually not a good thing. All right, you can be fined for plagiarism. It's actually a civil penalty for plagiarism. It can go into the several hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties if you do not cite your sources. So citing your sources means that you're going to create a bibliography or a works cited list, all right? And you have to put the sources in a specified format, a format that we use here at St. Francis College is the APA format, all right? The APA citation method. So just to go into my browser, I just want to show you something. I'm going to open up Firefox here, and I'm going to type in here night site, because night site actually gives you the citation for any type of source that you may want to use for your research. All right. So sometimes it's hard to write the entry into a works cited list. So this will actually help you compose that. So if you're using a book, encyclopedia, dictionary, periodical, we mentioned journal, magazine, newspaper, multimedia, sometimes you may want to use a cartoon in your paper. You can cite a cartoon, but we want to cite using the APA citation style, right? If some courses, like maybe if you're taking an English course, they may tell you to cite using MLA, the Modern Language Association. Most courses that deal with science would, if you're a nursing student, I know a lot of you students are nursing students, you would probably be citing using APA. APA means the American Psychological Association. It's for citing scientific types of papers. So clicking on APA will bring me up to the APA screen. It's citing a basic book in APA format. But what if I wanted to cite a film, DVD, or video? Because I watched a movie on Abraham Lincoln, and I saw a part in there that really made me think that this was some good stuff that I could write and put in a paper that showed me some of Abraham Lincoln's thoughts and why he became president. Okay, you would fill this all out. Actors. All right, so say I want to cite an actor who's playing Abraham Lincoln. Right? Does the main performer contribute to the media in another way? No. Number of actors, 1. Actor's name. I'm going to be Abraham Lincoln tonight. Okay. Movie title, Abe Lincoln, My Life. Making this up, by the way. Which type of performer? We're going to be citing, let's see. Now, this is interesting because I don't remember citing a movie in a while, but for citing, say, the directors of a movie, does the secondary performer contribute to the media in another way? No. Number of directors, say Steven Spielberg. This is just an example, but you would have to, speak to your instructor to find out how to create a citation like this. But most likely, if you're citing a movie, you want to cite the actor who's playing the part and perhaps the director of the movie. Paramount Studios is the distributor. Release year, 2018. United States. Okay, and then submit. And now we get my citation entry. So my reference list entry would be here. This is how you would actually write it out. And most likely you're citing a director, you're citing the actor. That would be a pretty good citing something from a movie. Okay, so getting back to some of these notes. So we have define, find, evaluate. What are you going to be evaluating? You're going to be evaluating whether the source. Let me put a good way, come up with a good sentence for this. Review the source for accuracy, whether it's reputable, sometimes current, all right, non-biased, right? So let's see, some of the things we want to talk about is accuracy, whether it's reputable, current, non-biased. I'm trying to think of some of the other things you'd want to look at. Those are like the main, I think, things that you'd really want to look at. You know, if you're kind of evaluating, well, another thing, you know, you're kind of evaluating overall the authority, you know, the author. So if someone writes a book on Abraham Lincoln, if I wrote a book on Abraham Lincoln, would it be a reputable source? Would it be reliable? I'm going to put reliability. All right, no, probably not, because I'm not an Abraham Lincoln scholar. So you would have to research the background of the author. Okay. Sometimes evaluating the backgrounds of people will help you determine whether or not they have the expertise in what they're producing. Okay. So if someone is directing a movie on Abraham Lincoln, yeah, they may be a great director like Steven Spielberg, but would the director necessarily need to have the knowledge about who Abraham Lincoln and all about his life? Probably not. It's probably the person who wrote the script, probably relied on people and relied on experts to have him or her create a script that can be very accurate. But sometimes you have these movies that aren't that accurate, right? That, you know, just because it's a movie about Abraham Lincoln could mean that, yeah, it has someone who looks like Abraham Lincoln in the movie, but a lot of the stuff that happens in there could be pretty fictitious, right? Maybe things made up to make the movie more exciting. So those are some things you have to look at, okay? And then organizing information. So once you get all this information together, you evaluate it. How are you going to look at the authority of the information? Well, someplace you can go to is Google Scholar. Why don't we look at that quickly? So Google Scholar. Let's see what it says there. I'm going to put information literacy skills. So if you're doing that, and you look at some of these articles on information literacy, you'll see that they're written by certain people. You would get some articles that are written by people who should be experts in their field. If they're writing an article for, say, a reputable organization like Wiley, and some of these other organizations. But Google Scholar gives you a lot of scholarly articles. But if we look at evaluating authority website, let's see if there's something that comes up for that. I don't know if I'm trying to think of a good website that can help you evaluate people. I mean, sometimes you just want to do a web search on the person, and you'll get maybe some information of all the different articles they've written, perhaps reviews of articles, all the other, not only articles, but books, periodicals that they've written, other works that maybe speeches that they've given. So I know Google Scholar will help you somewhat determine the authority of someone, but a lot of just good old-fashioned research will help as well. Okay. Now, organize the information. So once you get to once you get all the information together, all right, and have all this information coming from all different directions, you need to organize it. Okay. So a lot of people organize information by creating outlines. So create an outline that can, before you write your paper, right? You have Roman numeral number 1, A, B, C. Outline helps you organize your ideas, right? Your ideas. Create an outline. What else are you going to do to actually organize your work? Right? Something that you may want to do is put things in chronological order. Chronological order. There you go. That's ordered by date. Okay, so sometimes you have things that are ordered by date, and you come up with date. If you look at evaluating your resources, look at current, whether or not your resource is current, because it's good sometimes to evaluate resources and look at the currency of the resource. So if you're going to be writing, say, a paper on cancer, you want to make sure that you're relying on the latest cancer research. So you don't want to be looking at research that may be 10, 20, 30, 40 years old. However, if you're writing a historical paper, someone, again, who's a historical figure like Abraham Lincoln, maybe you want to look at articles, say, from the New York Times in the 1800s when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, because that would be more current to the period. So currency is important. It's all relative to the research topic. The last part of this is communicate. And I want you to think, so if we were in a class right now, we'd be asking you guys, come up with more ways we can organize information. Come up with more ways we can evaluate information. All right, communicate to a variety of audiences. I'm not going to use the word communicate again, but present, develop, here we go. Develop material to present. Material, I'm talking about media. So media is different ways to get across information. It could be print media, it could be video media, all right? It could be media like technological media like CDs, other devices that allow you to present. It could be a projector. Those are all ways. So media is a presentation means. Develop material media to present a variety of audiences using a variety of media. What I mean by that is that when you're presenting, you shouldn't just be talking nonstop, kind of like I am now. All right. I'm not just talking nonstop. I'm also using technological media. I'm using instructional media, instructional technology. So I'm sharing my screen. I'm using Google. I'm using YouTube. Using Microsoft Word. I went to websites. So that helps to make the presentation a little bit more dynamic. So when you're developing material to present, all right, make sure you're using a variety of media. It helps engage the audiences. Your audiences, all right, sometimes your audience may be more visual. Sometimes they may be more auditory, where they listen better. But when you mix and most of the time, you're going to have a combination of people who are visual, who are auditory, who are learners by actually doing things. So getting your audience involved in maybe in group activities. Communicating the information, perhaps through handouts, through other types of, if you create a PowerPoint presentation, you create handouts. When you print the presentation, there is a little option to create handouts that would be based on the slides that you actually present. So having all those things really help you when you're doing a presentation like that. Next thing I want to show you, let me open up my web browser again. I want to go to the St. Francis College Library. Now you should know how to get to the library. Just type in St. Francis College Library. It's library.sfc.edu. It's the first link on this page. Click on it, and it'll take you to the library. Okay, and really great thing. Anytime you're doing research, you should be doing research from the library, either physically by going to the library and taking out the old-fashioned hard copy books, But what you can do is search for everything right on the homepage. So anything you want to find, videos, periodicals, magazines, ebooks, you can do from the library. So right here, if I want to search for information literacy, and I click on go, everything that the library has in information literacy will be shown, right? However, when you see online access, you have a lot of ebooks, full text available articles. What you should be doing is logging in so you have full access to everything. So clicking on sign in, and let me just sign in. So you're going to be using your my St. Francis username and password. I'll save this here so I can always go back in. Okay, information literacy. If I want to read this ebook, I can click on the ebook. All right, and so I can click on book. Well, where is it? Download. I can download the ebook, download the chapters, read the chapters. So really some good stuff here. Anytime you're doing research, you should be using the library portal here. You can look, you can refine all your information by using some of this criteria to find different sources. All right, so you can limit things. So use this, and I would really use it for a lot of your research at St. Francis. Okay. Next thing and last thing I want to do is just talk about evaluating websites. So evaluating websites. I'm gonna Google that. And I like this. Something you may see is the CRAP method of evaluating websites. All right, so some things you're going to be looking at, and something that we kind of already spoke about, CRAP, all right? Currency, reliability, authority, accuracy, and purpose point of view. Okay. Now, what I want you to do for your live chat assignment, and this will be due Tuesday night, is to summarize what I spoke about, the 5 components of information literacy, in, let's see how many pages. At least 2 pages, so 2 to 5 pages, all right? Minimum 2 pages, all right, not too much. And maximum 5 pages. But talk a little bit more about defining your research question, like you can just use exactly the points I mentioned. Finding your sources, evaluating your sources, organizing your sources or organizing your information, and communicating your information, okay? All right, next thing that I want you to do, and we can do together, is, looking at some bad websites, right? So bad, right, non-reputable website. There is something I'm trying to find here, which I had up a little earlier. What are some examples of credible websites and non-credible websites? There were some good things that I saw here before. All right. This wasn't it. I think this may have been it. Here's a list of non-credible websites and what makes them non-credible. All right, so some things that I know offhand, I don't want to get viruses by going to some of these things, but some things you should look at, and I wanted to have examples for you, but we're kind of running out of time too. I don't want to talk here forever, bore you guys to death over here, but always look at the URL to a site, okay? So when you're looking at the URL, and I'll go back to my notes here, all right? If you go to the last part of a URL, all right, and that's the part that ends with, say, .edu, .com, .gov, all right? You should really know how to evaluate the URL, because we talk about .com, .gov, .edu, .org. Some of these parts of the URL, and what's URL? It means uniform, or some people say universal. resource locator. All right, it's just a web address. Okay, so www.whatever.edu. Anything that ends with an edu is going to be most likely a reliable source. All right, because it's coming from an educational institution. Right, most educational institutes, that means the website's sponsored by an educational institution, and that's usually going to be a college or university. These sites are going to be more credible than, say, .com sites, because .com means a commercial organization. So commercial organizations are usually those sites that will give information about a company, advertise, what the company sells or what the service of the company is. Sometimes will allow for purchasing goods online. So .com is for a commercial organization, probably the least reliable, because the intent of that website is to make money. .gov is coming from the government, right? So that part of the extension to the URL is reserved for governmental agencies owned by the United States of America, or owned by the United States federal government. So these .gov sites are typically viewed as credible. The government tries to give out accurate information. All right, and you may see a site that ends with .mil, and that would be for military entities. All right, and that's usually credible information there too, because it's sponsored by the government. Some people may disagree with me. And we have .org. Organizations, the .org extension is usually reserved for institutions that are not for profit. It could be religious institutions, charitable organizations. All right. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that .org is usually very credible, but they usually exist so these organizations will exist for a purpose. And they may have their own agenda. So you really have to read the mission statement that exists on some of these sites to determine what the agenda of the site is. All right, it could be pushing some type of, maybe a religious agenda. It could be pushing a political agenda. It could be pushing some other type of agenda that you just have to make sure that you know exactly the approach of the site. Most .orgs, though, are considered very reliable. The least reliable is .com, right? So some other, I'm going to put here, least reliable, usually reliable. Something I forgot to, is like .net. So .net is usually reserved for an internet service provider, and that's usually like the .com. There's a hidden agenda for that. So least reliable in comparison to others. Usually reliable. Usually, I'll fix that typo in a second. Okay, some other, and we'll wrap this up soon, ways to evaluate the reliability of a website. Another thing you want to look at, spelling errors. If there are lots of spelling errors or some spelling errors, you know that that website is most likely not reliable, right? If the person who created the site, the author of the site, did not take the time to look for spelling errors, then maybe perhaps that person or those people are not taking the time to check their sources, right? Whatever they're reporting on. So spelling error is usually number one. Too many advertisements. The site has lots of, let's see, advertisements all over the place, banners, left, right, flashing. That is not a reliable website. It means that they're there just to make money. They want you to click on that. That's called clickbait. Click on that, and they probably get paid pennies for every click. And then if they have millions of clicks, they're probably making some good money for that, right? Excuse me. The spelling errors, too many advertisements. Obviously, the extension that we just spoke about. right? What else? Some of the ways to evaluate aesthetics for organization of information. So very like clunky menu interfaces. The site is slow, doesn't work well. All right, you have to think that why is this site available if there's so many errors? You know, not every website is going to be perfect. There's always going to be problems, especially the more technical sites aren't going to work as well as they should work because there's lots of bells, components, and whistles. That does not make it unreliable. It just means that maybe there's lots of extra bells and whistles that can affect the operability of the site, okay? Some other ways, I think those are like the main ways. If you can think of any others, you can reach out to me. What I want you to do on the last page of your paper, on either page 2 or page 5, is just give me a paragraph explaining ways to evaluate the reliability of a website. So again, you know, go over some of these concepts that I just spoke about. I'm going to wrap this up here. I think I went over a lot of information with you. Hopefully you have a better understanding about research. I'd like to include this in all the IT classes because, you know, every student can benefit from a hour lecture, less than an hour lecture, I guess in this case, in information literacy. So everyone have a good night. Get your live chat assignment in. You know where to find the live chat assignment. It's in Canvas. Upload it. I will upload this recording as a link, and I want everyone to have a wonderful night. You know where to reach me. You can always email me if you have any questions. Take care, everyone.